Hello, and welcome to Sounion, one of the most beautiful archaeological sites in all of Greece. Now, the sanctuary you see here is located on the southernmost tip of the Attica Peninsula. That's the same peninsula that Athens lies on. And because of the strategic location, the site's been important for thousands of years. In fact, the first habitation at the site dates back more than 3,000 years all the way to the Bronze Age. And the epic poet Homer actually mentions King Menelaus coming back from the Trojan War, bearing several of his troops right here at this site. And as you look off into the distance at the kind of location and the geographic and topographic setting, you get a sense for why it's been so important, right? The ability to guide traffic and ships as it comes to and from Athens. And for that reason, it's held a religious and a political and a military and an economic significance for thousands of years. So let's go ahead and learn a little bit more. All right, now the temple you see behind me here belongs to a sanctuary that was dedicated to Poseidon, god of the sea. And when you look all around you here, out into the insanely blue waters of the Aegean, you can see why this was dedicated to Poseidon. Now, we're located here at the site of Sounion, the southernmost tip on the Attica Peninsula. That's the same peninsula that Athens is located on. And you get the sense for why this is put in this exact location, right? So this is a common trait in Greek religion, identifying the kind of location of the sanctuary with the attributes of the god. And so Zeus, for example, right, god of the sky, he has his sanctuaries up on mountaintops, as high up in the sky as you can get. Hades, god of the underworld, his are frequently in caves. And Poseidon, right here, located next to the sea. And so as ships would depart from Athens, right, they would sail down the western coast of the Attica Peninsula, cross over eastwards and head towards Asia Minor or modern-day Turkey. This temple of Poseidon is the last thing they would see along the way. And they would make their offering or sacrifice for safe passage as they headed eastward. And so not only did it serve this sort of religious function, but it also served as a useful strategic lookout for any ships coming out of or into Athens in classical antiquity. So the temple behind me here, right, obviously, as you look around, dedicated to the god Poseidon, right, god of the sea, was built between the years 444 and 440 BC. But this actually wasn't the earliest temple on the site. Going back to the 6th century or the 500s BC, we actually have an earlier temple also dedicated to Poseidon. But this all changed in the Greek and Persian wars of the early 5th century, between 490 and 479 BC. And in that, the famous Battle of Thermopylae, the Greeks lost, right? The famous Spartan stand at Thermopylae. The Persians were able to win that one. And as a result, the Greeks and the Athenians had to retreat to the city of Corinth. That let the Persians essentially burn the entire coast of Attica, including the Acropolis in Athens itself and the site of Sounion right here. So that was the fate of the first temple of Poseidon. But the Greeks eventually won that war. And in the aftermath, the city of Athens became fabulously wealthy as head of the Delian League. And they used that wealth to create an entirely new architectural program. So part of that program you can see on the Acropolis in Athens, right? The Parthenon, the Erechtheion, the Propylaea, the Temple of Athena Nike. But you can also see part of it behind me right here with the Temple of Poseidon. Now, what we're looking at here, right, is a Doric style temple. And what that means is that we've got these kind of large, thick columns. They sit directly on the base, which we call the stylobate. Above those columns sit these kind of plain bowl-shaped capitals. And above that, we would have had a series of triglyphs and metopes, the triglyphs being the kind of 3 vertical lines, the metopes being these squares that would have had sculptural decoration. Now, inside of that, you can see the remnants of kind of another colonnade in the interior, and that would have held a continuous sculptural frieze. And this is actually another connection to the Parthenon in Athens. Now that frieze would have contained depictions of the Greeks battling the centaurs and also the heroic deeds of the Athenian hero Theseus. And these weren't just kind of for fun, right? Something nice to look at when you come to the temple. These were essentially metaphors, right? So when the Greeks are triumphing over the centaurs, it's essentially a message saying the Greeks are triumphing over barbarians, right? It's the triumph of their kind of conception of civilization over the barbarians, right? In particular, in this instance, that would have represented the Persians. So at sites like this, right, we get religious art and religious architecture, not just there for good looks, but sending messages to the visitors who would come to worship Poseidon. Now, in the aftermath of the Persian Wars, the Greeks placed a new premium on safety. The result of that is what you're looking at right here. This is a 5th century BC defensive wall, enclosing the sanctuary to Poseidon that you can see on the interior there. Now, this thing is absolutely massive, more than 10 feet wide in some places. And not only did it protect the sanctuary, there were also several other kind of buildings on the inside. So you get some houses, some workshops, and the defensive structure would have stretched all the way down to the sea, enclosing a small port or harbor so that ships could safely dock. The center of it all, of course, though, is that beautiful temple to Poseidon on the Acropolis there. All right, now, the oldest temple here at the site of Sounion isn't that beautiful Doric temple up on the hill over there dedicated to Poseidon. Nope, it's the foundations of what you see around me right here. And that is the kind of remnants of a temple dedicated to the goddess Athena. It was built in the 6th century BC, the 500s, and the kind of dedication to Athena makes sense when you think about the role that Athens played in the region of Attica right here. Now, this idea that you've got two gods or goddesses being worshipped more or less at the same site is something that's pretty common in Greek antiquity. So, for example, at the site of Delphi, you get this as well, where it's most famously dedicated to the god Apollo, but there's also another temple to the goddess Athena there. Now, if you're wondering why this is somewhat in shambles, you can thank the ancient Persians. It was in 480 BC that their army, led by their king Xerxes, invaded the Greek mainland. And after defeating the Spartans at the famous Battle of Thermopylae in 480, the Greeks, including the Athenians and all the people of Attica, retreated to the site of Corinth. And that left this entire area basically wide open, unprotected. The Persians went through and burnt everything to the ground. Now, in some ways, this was a blessing. It provided a blank canvas for the beautiful Doric temple to Poseidon that you see up there, built in the 400s. But for the temple of Athena right here, well, you get the reason why it's in, let's say, less than pristine condition. As we wrap up our journey to Sounion, we can reflect on kind of its transcendence through the ages. So, during the early modern period, in the 1700s, 1800s, British aristocrats would go on something known as the Grand Tour, which is basically visiting the coolest archaeological sites from throughout the Mediterranean. And in fact, the poet Lord Byron came here to Sounion and inscribed his name on one of the columns. I'll give you a little extra credit if you can find it. And so as we wrap up, we can see ourselves continuing a tradition that has gone on for more than 2,500 years, coming here to Sounion to marvel at the kind of majesty of this Doric Greek temple.